What's going on, everyone? Fearless Football Forecast here. It is week 2 of the NFL season. We're already 1 week down, and I must say it was absolutely amazing to have football on this last week. And if you guys didn't watch our podcast from last week, we actually killed it. We were 5 for 5 with all of our predictions that we told you guys. Both of our touchdown scorer bets hit. Our underdog of the week, which was the Cleveland Browns, hit. And both of our suicide pool picks were correct. So just know to subscribe because you're always going to get those winners with us. And we're going to cover all that as well. We got a lot of news to get to. But first of all, I just want to ask you, what did you think overall about week 1? Not necessarily team-specific stuff, because we'll talk about that when we get to every single prediction. But just what were your overall thoughts?
Well, my first thought was thank God football's back was my first thought. And my second thought, honestly, the thing that jumped out to me was just sloppy. And that's how it is every week, week 1 every year. But the biggest thing to me, which I feel like, and maybe I've just forgotten, but I feel like the offensive lines this past weekend were pretty much across the board all subpar. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, there were some that were doing well, but it just felt like a lot of bad O-line play. And if an offensive line is playing bad, defenses are going to tear you apart. Obviously, we'll get into more specific stuff as we break down each game. But it was just a really weird week where usually week 1 it favors offenses. This week, a lot more people are sitting their players. And now that people are sitting their players, there's just so much rust on these offensive guys with timing and stuff. So, weird weekend for sure, but I'm so happy that it was back.
Yeah, I mean, really, the only shootout we had was the Chargers and Dolphins game. But yeah, no, I was texting you about it yesterday. I was saying that it has to be the highest amount of defensive touchdowns. You also brought up a good point that it might be the highest percentage. And last night just added to that. I mean, look at even at the very end of that game, there was another defensive touchdown. It just seemed like every minute someone was getting sacked. So yeah, the O-line play across the board was bad, but it also shows how great the D-line prospects have been, and we've been hyping them up throughout our draft scouting and everything for the last 4 years, and now they're all kind of entering their primes. I mean, there are players like one that I have on right now, who's just unguardable pretty much. And I know we wanted to talk a little bit about our MVP of the week, so I'll just get started before we jump into the news. I'm not going to give it to one specific player, but just overall, not just because I'm in the jersey, but I think the Dallas Cowboys defense for your fantasy leagues, if you drafted them as a defense, they got so many points. They got 38 in most formats. They were just incredible. I can't remember the last time that I've seen a 40-point blowout win in the NFL. I mean, that was like a college football score. The fact that the Giants couldn't even score in garbage time just shows how well Dan Quinn has this defense riled up, because even the second string guys, they weren't stopping. They were still going for the sacks. There were still turnovers. The entire Cowboys defense played pretty much a flawless game, in a game where they didn't even need to score much on offense. There were 2 defensive touchdowns in that game.
Yeah, I mean, that's an obvious great pick. The defense was fantastic on Sunday night. My MVP of the week is going to go to Tyreek Hill. He just dominated. He completely takes over games, and he makes it look so easy. I know we both mentioned him, that we liked him as Offensive Player of the Year, and he made a great first step towards that. Obviously, Tua, when he's healthy, is a good quarterback, but having a weapon like Tyreek just makes your job so easy. Like, he was that one throw on the game-scoring drive where it was 3rd and 10, I think it was, and he was like, I know Tyreek's going to go, and he just, he's like a center fielder, man. He's not even
No, yeah, he's unbelievable.
He's so good, dude. But yeah, so Tyreek's going to be my MVP of the week.
Yeah, even though the Chiefs won a Super Bowl after he left, I think that that's going to just still be always a what if he stayed, because he and Mahomes were so perfect, and thankfully Tua has a good enough deep ball to at least make him productive. Tyreek Hill, I think he's going to break that record this year. I have him for most receiving yards. I was very happy about that. But now we'll get into the news before we get into all of our bets. First piece of news actually stays with the Chiefs, and I think it was a brilliant move by Kansas City to only get a 1-year deal in. That way they actually see what Chris Jones brings to this team. and if they're actually going to want to restructure his contract moving forward and sign him to a multiple year deal or let him hit free agency next year.
Yeah, so we really don't know the exact incentive structure, but what we do know is that it's up to 25 million in incentives. And one thing about incentives is, and I just found this out today. Apparently, you can't have an incentive in a contract if it's something that was done the previous year. So like, they can't make win a Super Bowl an incentive because they did it last year. You know what I mean? So I'm interested to see what his incentives are because he had like 15 and a half sacks last year. So if his incentive structure is to get 16 sacks, things like that. He had such a good year last year that if it's to get better, I kind of think it's going to be like a playoff thing. Like he didn't have a sack in the Super Bowl. Maybe it's like get a sack in the Super Bowl, things like that. I'm really excited to see what the incentives are. But either way, this is a win-win. Either he's extremely productive and you have to pay him out of your cap next year, which it is what it is, or he's still solid and you don't have to pay him anything more than what you were already giving him. So I think it was a really good deal for the Chiefs, obviously. I think they definitely would have won that game last week if he was playing. Even though the defense was really good, just having him would have made him that much better. So, we'll get into how we feel with him if he's going to play this week later on. But, no brainer for the Chiefs. They had to bring him back.
And from a good part of news to a very sad point of news, last night, Aaron Rodgers' Jets debut in the most Jets fashion scenario of all time. His only highlight with the Jets is going to be running down to the field carrying the American flag. Torn Achilles, and he's out for the entire season. You got to feel for Jets fans. Like, they got their consolation prize in getting the victory on Monday night, but at the end of the day, you can't really go home too happy knowing that the guy that you brought in that was supposed to be your savior is now out for the year. And I was listening to some interesting takes today because they were saying if the Vikings continue to do bad, that Cousins would be an option, but he's not really because he'd have to be paid as well. So you're just going to have so much of your salary cap going to quarterbacks. And Rodgers is it's actually unbelievable that this happened. But yeah, sorry for the Jets. You're probably not going to win the division or make the playoffs now.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If the Jets were in the NFC, this hurts just a little bit less because you think that their defense is so good. And we saw it last night. We'll talk about the game a little bit when we talk about the teams, when we get into the games coming up this week. But their defense is just so good. Like, it's, easily one of the best defenses in the league. And their defense is good enough to be a playoff team. Zach Wilson, will he come out of his shell? Will they sign a guy? I saw a notification that apparently they're interested in Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah, I saw that too.
You might as well start fucking Zach Wilson. The guy hasn't played a football game in 7 years. Watson missed 1 year and looked like it was me out there. So I highly doubt Colin Kaepernick is the answer at quarterback. But it is just so sad because with Rodgers, they obviously had a chance to, win the division, make a deep playoff run. Without him now, could they make the playoffs still? Yeah, I don't think they're going to win this division. Two great teams in this division with them. And, even a wild card spot's going to be tough with the AFC being so deep this year.
Yeah, I'm glad that I didn't have any Jets bets. I know you were on the Jets a lot more than I was as a team overall. The defense even looked better than it did last year. But my takeaway on that, their defense is absolutely fantastic, but I think Josh Allen is just a absolute idiot. It seemed like he wanted to win them the game. That was my main takeaway from last night. He forced throws like nobody. He looked bad. He looked like Jameis Winston level bad last night. But we'll get to that more in the breakdowns. So moving on to our dog of the week. We hit last week, the Cleveland Browns, and we're actually going to go back and fade the same team that we faded last week. This week, we're rolling with the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens, it's their game script last week went pretty much how we said it on the show. We said that the Texans were going to keep it close the first half, and then the Ravens would pull away. Now, obviously, they had to make some adjustments mid-game as well because J.K. Dobbins went down with an injury. But the way that the Baltimore Ravens have always been run is that when one guy goes down, another guy steps up in the running back department. That isn't necessarily true with the rest of their team, but the Baltimore Ravens have always found great options at running back. They drafted a guy who we were pretty high on in Keaton Mitchell coming into the season. So I'm excited to see as the season goes on, like how much more he gets added to the offense. Because obviously it's a lot easier to just give the Gus Bus the wagon or Justice Hill, because those two guys are pretty big bruising backs. But anyway, I figured I would have to mention Dobbins as well since we didn't in the news. But this matchup against Burrow, honestly, Stroud looked pretty composed, especially compared to his preseason. And Roquan Smith just looked like an absolute monster. I think he gets to Burrow. After Burrow's contract, he looked really, really bad last week against the Browns. I mean, I knew we were predicting the Browns to win, but I don't know if we knew they were going to win by that much. My main reason why I'm on the Ravens this week, though, is that Lamar didn't play that much in the preseason, if at all. And it seemed like last week he was kind of like getting a new, glimpse at this new offense, an offense that's a lot more vertical than he's ever been used to. And I think that week 2 is when it actually translates. Like, I would not be shocked. I know I started Lamar as my start of the week last week. I wanted to this week, but I'm not going to be that guy that picks the same player back-to-back weeks. But I do think that Lamar is actually going to air it out. And it's going to be the first time that you're like, wow, okay, this new offensive coordinator is actually making some differences. Whereas last week, they could kind of play a little bit more conservative, knowing that they were against a worse team. But in this game, I think that the air yards for Lamar are more than they have been in his career.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, this is our dog of the week. I think that the Ravens are going to win this game as well. I think that these are two pretty even caliber teams, but and I think that Burrow is going to be better than last week. There's no way that he throws for less than 100 yards 2 weeks in a row. It was rainy, but the offensive line played horribly. And the Ravens do have a good defensive line. I think that they're going to be able to apply a decent amount of pressure, even though I don't think as much as last week as the Browns did. So defensively, I think they'll be getting pressure. I think that the Bengals will actually score this week. They'll get more than one field goal. But I think that it's going to come down to, like you said, the offense. I'm assuming that Mark Andrews is going to play this week. I think that it was more a precautionary thing of, let's let them sit this week. We're playing the stinky Texans. We'll give them an extra week to come back, get healthier. Next week's a big game against a divisional opponent, that kind of thing. And I think that that's really going to help Lamar out. Like you said, obviously, Russ was a big factor, I think, for sure. But I also think that Mark Andrews is the level of tight end. There's not many of them, but he's the level of tight end where it changes your offense dramatically. So I think that having him back as his little safety blanket is going to make Lamar feel a lot better. I'm really excited to see what Zay Flowers does this week. He looked incredible last week. I honestly thought about making him my MVP, but he didn't really matter in the scope of winning the game. That's why I didn't. But he looked so explosive. Dude, he's so explosive, just fantastic. So I'm excited to see with Andrews there. I'm excited to see if they'll let him kind of stretch the field a little bit more. I feel like Zay was the number one with the the short intermediate routes. I think that's going to be Andrews' job this next week. I think they might let Zay kind of sling it deep a little bit more this week. But I think that Lamar is going to take that next step. Shook that rust off last week, and I think he's going to have a good game.
Yeah, and OBJ even had a pretty nice catch, and I expect him to have a good week this week as well. Speaking of players that we think that we're going to have a good week, it's time for our touchdown scorer segment. We hit both of these last week. You had J.K. Dobbins, who got it right before the injury, and I had Cam Akers, who in a Rams game that we'll talk about later, I was actually on the Rams. In a Rams game where pretty much every running back scored at least once, Cam Akers was a lock. Because I went a little bit more conservative last week, I'm actually going for the plus 250 play here, and that is TJ Hawkinson. My main reasoning for this is that Nakobe Dean, who's a great cover linebacker, he's out for the Eagles. They're already weak at linebacker. I expect a monster game from TJ Hawkinson. I will mention his name later in the show when we do our fantasy football segment. But I love Hawkinson to get a touchdown this week. I think that the Vikings are going to be out to prove a lot. And Kirk Cousins is going to get off to a hot start, especially with Hawkinson. So.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I think that the Eagles' defense proved to be a little fallible with the dink and dunk passing game, which tight end T.J. Hawkinson, tight ends are always eating up the middle, short, intermediate part of the field. So I could definitely see that one happening. I'm going to jump into my touchdown scorer of the week, and it's funny because it's in the same game. I'm going to go with A.J. Brown. I think that A.J. Brown is one of those receivers that he kind of and it's a little bit of annoying as an Eagles fan, but he does this. He likes to chirp a little bit. And I'm not saying that he's going to chirp after week one. The Eagles won. He was pretty productive. He wasn't fantastic. But I think that they're going to be in the red zone a lot more than they were last week. I think I've said it earlier. I've said it before. I think that the Vikings defense is god awful. I think that the Eagles are going to pretty much have their way with them. I think they're going to be able to score a lot of points. And I think that A.J. Brown is going to be able to bully any one of their corners that they try and match up against them. And the thing with A.J. Brown, too, is it's not just in the red zone. He can score a deep bomb if need be. I think that he's going to be heavily targeted, and I think that he's going to have one of those big blow-up games, like 100 yards, one, maybe even 2 touchdowns. I think he's going to be great this week.
Yeah, I love Brown this week as well. Definitely need him for my one fantasy league. I was projected to win by 50 points and only won by 1 point. And our final segment before we actually get into the breakdowns of every single game is our fantasy waiver wire segment. And we're not just going to talk about a bunch of waivers and bore you. We're actually just going to give you each one player. I'll go first, not the guy who's on the screen because that's your guy, but I'm actually going to go at wide receiver with Kendrick Bourne. He had 17 targets. What more can you say? I mean, 17 targets when you're Mac Jones' go-to guy, and Jones is a limited quarterback, so he is going to continue to target his guy. He ended up actually reeling in 13 of those receptions, had a touchdown as well. It was funny because I was listening to Jason McCourty on the Good Morning Football last week, and he was saying, because obviously he's connected to the Patriots, he was saying how the most improved player that nobody was talking about was Kendrick Bourne. And when I look at the waiver wires, especially with wide receiver, there are a lot of options this week. I mean, I personally had Romeo Doubs on my bench already drafted. That's why I'm not saying him, but I think he's a great option. But I think everyone's going to be running to the Puka Nakuas of the world who maybe had a fantastic week one, but I don't think it's going to translate the rest of the season. Whereas I can see Kendrick Bourne being that guy. I mean, Juju looked very bad in this entire game. The Eagles defense is pretty solid, especially their secondary. So I really like Kendrick Bourne. And this week he's got a very favorable matchup against the Miami Dolphins defense that, as you saw, let up 31 points this last weekend. So I even like Bourne a lot to start this week.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump into my guy. I'm going to go with our boy. We've talked about him countless times, Roschon Johnson. I just really want to pound it in there because this is really going to be one of the last chances you get. I looked on ESPN. He's only owned on right around 21% of rosters, and I think it should be close to 80%. I mean, I think that unless you're in one of those weird leagues, like 6-8 man league, then maybe you don't have to. But if you're in a 10-man league or more, you have to have him on your team. I think he's more talented than Khalil Herbert. And I think that what makes him so good is, and we saw it this week, he can run and he's great in the receiving game. One of the things, and I'll touch on it more when we get to the game breakdown, but the Bears, out of all the teams that I chose to pick the playoffs, other than the Jets because of the Rodgers injury, the Bears scared me the most. They looked god awful. But that is besides the point. What the main reason I'm bringing that up is I don't think their defense, even by the end of the year, is going to be, a top half of the league defense. So, yes, he caught a lot of passes. I think that that's going to be an option for him every single week. And I think that he has the ability to capitalize with those opportunities. And obviously, you saw it. They're not afraid to use him in the red zone. So, great running back. both in the run and the receiving game. And I think by the time we get to midseason, he's going to be one of those guys who you're not even questioning if you should start him or not. He's just going to start every week for you.
Yeah, he looked great. I mean, he looked like exactly what happened in Texas, where he had so many explosive plays, even though it was on such limited touches. And I do expect his touches to increase as well. Here we go. Week 2. So now you're really going to get our true opinions on the games from last week, what we really thought, also about what we're going forward. Week 1, I'm going to shock a lot of people. I'm just going to get it out of the way. I think that the Minnesota Vikings are going to defeat the Philadelphia Eagles, mainly because they have been absolutely destroyed the last 2 times that they played them. And when that happens, you really get like that's a game where you really like mark your calendar for every single year, is when a team absolutely embarrasses you. Last week, the Vikings had a great week 1. They come into week 2 against the Eagles, very similar situation, and ended up getting killed. What was the score? Wasn't it? They only had 1 touchdown, I think, the Vikings, right? I think it was like 28-7, something like that last year.
Yeah, I think it was like 34-10.
34-10. Yeah, like something still pretty significant. Even if they don't win, I do think they keep it close. I'm actually going to include Vikings +7 in our bet of the week segment later this week. I think that they definitely cover. The Eagles just didn't look that great against the team in the Patriots that I still think isn't that talented. And the Vikings, they did lose to the Bucs. They lost to Baker Mayfield. That Mike Evans play was just an insane broken coverage. And yes, that can happen with A.J. Brown. I just think a lot of people are expecting this to be an Eagles massacre, but without Rashad Penny, Kenny Gainwell is missing practice right now. That the Eagles run game is going to take a little bit of a hit. DeAndre Swift only got 2 touches last week. He's going to need to step up a lot in order for the Eagles to win this game. I think it's going to be a shootout. I initially leaned like Eagles over them by like 3. So I really like the spread more than anything. But as far as a bold prediction this week, that's probably going to be my bold one, similar to how last week the Rams were my bold one. And that happened. So I'll go with the Vikings.
Yeah, so you and I, obviously, we talked a little bit of just about the Eagles game before this, and we couldn't see things any more different in this game. I think that the Eagles are definitely going to win this game. I think that they're going to win the game, and I said this last week, and it wasn't correct, but I think they're going to end up winning this game pretty convincingly by the end of it. I just think that there are a few things. The Patriots defense is really good, like always. And the Eagles players didn't play in the preseason, so there was a little bit of rust. They've gotten that rust off. They're going to be playing at home. That rowdy crowd hasn't seen a game in the length since the NFC Championship game. It's going to be wild in there. Kirk Cousins is going to go into a shell of himself. I think that they're not going to get like shut out or anything, but I think that the Eagles are going to be able to score. And I said it when I was talking about A.J. Brown. I think they're going to get 30 or more points. I kind of see this game like a 34, something like that, 34-20, something in that range. I think that the Eagles are going to take care of business at home, and it's going to be one of those games where, even like last year, talking about last year when these two teams played, week 1, the Eagles played the Lions. They barely squeaked out a win. And people were like, the Eagles are going to be just like they were the year before, wild card team, you know what I mean? And then we whooped the Vikings. We went on a hot streak. Obviously, we all know what we did. I see that game pretty similarly. I think that we're going to win this game pretty convincingly, and that people are going to be like, oh, okay, here are the Eagles that we expected.
Yeah, I just think it's so weird that they did the exact same week, the exact same like situation, another primetime game. Like if it was in the 1 o'clock slate, that would be a little bit less weird. But the fact that it's 2 back-to-back primetime games in like the exact same spot is crazy. Moving on to the 1 o'clocks, the first game we have listed, we already talked about. We both have the Ravens. Next up, Lions, Seahawks. Lions are favored here pretty big. They're favored minus 240 on some books, including mine, minus 260. I am going to end up picking the Lions in this game, but I would not be shocked at all if the Seahawks won. I actually do believe that Rams team is better than most people think. I had their over on the season going into it. And at the end of the day, Geno Smith was an outlier last season. I was never really in the camp that believed that the Seahawks were going to be great. I do think that Vegas is overreacting a lot to the Lions defeating the Chiefs last week, though. Whereas going into the season, had the Lions lost last week, I feel like they'd still be favored, but it would be like minus 130 plus 110, whereas they're minus 255. As a gambling guy, I wouldn't touch the Lions at minus 255, even though I am going to pick them to win this game.
Yeah, so this is one of the games that I'm more torn on the week. It's one of those things where after seeing week one, you don't want to overreact in one way or another. The big thing for me, I think that the Lions are a good team. I've talked about that. We talked about that plenty of times. But I think that the Seahawks are going to be closer to that wild card team that they were last year, a consistent team that's a tough out each and every week, no matter who they play, than what they looked like last week. One of the big things, and the Seahawks signed Jason Peters today. So one of the big things that worries me, and this is really when the game fell off the rails last week, was both their left tackle, the Seahawks I'm talking about, both their left tackle and right tackle both got hurt. And that's really when the game started to turn around, because that entire first half, Seattle was they were up for most of the first most of the first half. They were right there neck and neck, and then those two tackles go out. All of a sudden, boom, Geno's getting pressure, and he just folded like a chair. So I'm interested to see if at least one of them can come back and play. But I do like the Lions team, and it's at home. This one, like I said, is going to be tough for me, but I am actually going to go with the Seahawks. Like I said, this is one that I'm not truly I wouldn't touch it with I wouldn't even think about betting it at all, either side. But I think that the Seahawks are a better team than they showed week one, and I think that they'll be able to pull off a win here.
Yeah, so even though we had opposite picks on that, kind of the same rationale in the game, like you agree with me that obviously if you're picking the Seahawks, the Lions shouldn't be minus 250.
Yeah.
Next game on the list is the Colts versus the Texans. Pretty much an even game as far as gambling goes, minus 1.5 line for the Colts. I know I really like the Colts this week. They looked better than I thought defensively last week against the Jaguars team that is solid all around. Obviously, they allowed a lot of yards to Calvin Ridley, but they did a great job at half to really adjust to that and then shut him down. I mean, he had 90 yards in the first half and then only 15 in the second half. So they did a good job at making adjustments. It was great to see Leonard out there. He seemed pretty explosive making plays. The one reason why I was a little hesitant initially to guarantee that the Colts are going to be my pick is just because that fumble scoop and score thing was a little bit of BS and just like a bad play by that by whoever had the ball in his hand on the Jags. And that was just a stupid play. He should have known better. But in my opinion, I think the score would have been bigger had it not been for that. But at the end of the day, I'm just going to go with the more talented rookie quarterback. And in that situation, it's Anthony Richardson. He looked good. He looked composed. And now against a team that I think he can win in a game where it's going to be like 17-13, I think Richardson can get that extra momentum and get the Colts a win.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that the Colts are going to win this game. One of the things that at least I was worried about coming in was kind of like the turnover mistakes that Anthony Richardson might have early on in the season. And really last week, even though he didn't light it up or anything, he didn't have any turnovers until towards the end of the game when it was like, all right, we need to score. It's now or never. They were pressing. We need to catch up or we're going to lose this game. So, I mean, I can't really blame them for being too aggressive in a spot where if you don't score, you lose, things like that. But, yeah, I just think that Richardson's the better quarterback. I think that the Colts have the better defense overall. And, I think that this is pretty easy cut and dry for me. I think, I don't think they're going to blow them out by any means, but I do think that they're going to win this game.
And up next, a game that's really hard to decide, in my opinion, the Chicago Bears versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Um, this is a game where I'm not going to put any of my money on it. And this is the thing. We were talking before we actually got on the air about how week 2 is always the week in the NFL that you should really keep your money away from. Player props, you can do whatever you want. Obviously, ride or dog of the week. But the reason for that is because you can really overreact to certain things. And this is a perfect example of this. I went back and checked out because it was one of the games that wasn't on at my local bar, the Packers Bears game. So I didn't see much of it. So I went back and watched a lot of it. As bad as the Bears were, it seemed like a lot of the Packers' momentum was on big plays, and I don't know if the Bucs have the talent, especially with Baker Mayfield at quarterback, in order to have those big plays. I mean, Aaron Jones looked like Derrick Henry last week, and I know that you think that Rachaad White is going to do that this week, but I just don't see how it happens with his build and just the way that he runs the ball. But I think that the Bears come back, and at the end of the day, we both had the Bears as a playoff team. And if they are, they're going to need to win this week in a game that I'm sure both of us scripted before the season that the Bears were going to win. And Baker Mayfield, it was more like with the Vikings, just Kirk making bad mistakes than Baker really doing anything that's significant. And at the end of the day, Baker's a guy where he'll have a mediocre game or a good game, and then the next week have an absolutely horrible game. So I wouldn't be shocked if Baker Mayfield has 2 or 3 picks. So I am going to go with the Chicago Bears in a game that I don't expect to, like, I wouldn't be shocked if either team won, but I don't expect either of these teams to put up more than 20 points. I think it'll be very similar to that Colts-Texans game where it's like a 17-14 type victory.
Yeah, I see the game the exact same way. I think it's going to be pretty low scoring. This is another one of those games that's really tough, as you said. It's where, we both had the Bears as a playoff team coming into the season, and after 1 week, am I really ready to send them off? And I'm not. I actually liked the Buccaneers last week. I think that I like them because I think their defense is as healthy as it's going to be. Obviously, early on. But I just, like you said, I don't think that the Bears offense, the way they won last week was 5 yards, 5 yards, like he threw it more than like 10 yards, like 3 times. It wasn't much explosive plays. I think that the Bears defense isn't great, but I don't think that the Bucs offense is an offense that's going to take supreme advantage of that. I think that, I think it's going to be a little bit more high scoring, like 20 something to 20 something. I don't think it's going to be extremely low scoring. I don't think the Bears defense is good enough for that. But I think that the Bears offense is going to be able to put up points this week. I trust, like I said, I'm big on the Packers. I like their defense a lot, the Packers. And I'm higher on Jordan Love than most, I would say. So I just think that, like you said, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Baker Mayfield went into his shell and made a couple of huge mistakes that really cost the Bears, or that really cost the Bucs. And I'm going to stick with the Bears on this one as well.
Yeah, one more thing that I didn't mention. I mean, Justin Jefferson is Justin Jefferson, but he did have 160 yards last week. I was going to make DJ Moore my start of the week at wide receiver this week, had it not been for one other player. So I did just want to shout him out. I do think that DJ Moore ends up really making an impact in this game, and that's one of the main reasons why I'm picking the Bears this week. Up next is my favorite game of the week, the game that I'm looking forward to the most, a game that I will possibly be attending as it's only 40 minutes from where I live, and that is the Chiefs at the Jaguars. I cannot wait for this game. This week, the 1 o'clock slate brings us 2 of the most exciting games in the Ravens Bengals and the Chiefs Jaguars. Every single time that these teams have played, it has been close. Last year, it was one of the best playoff games of the year. Very tight game. Mahomes wasn't healthy, so I'm sure that he's going to come back this week after a loss. The Chiefs are 13-3, and Mahomes is definitely going to come out knowing that this is the team that injured him. This is the team that made the road to the Super Bowl even harder for him, and he's going to ball out. I expect this game to be the highest scoring game of the week. I think just whoever has the ball at the very end of the game is going to win. Trevor Lawrence, we I, you could knock the pick and then the little fumble play, but he looked good. Like he was making some fantastic throws in the tight windows. He had excellent ball placement. I mean that one that one pass in the end zone to Zay Jones was ridiculous. I mean, you could only put the ball right there in order for it to be a touchdown, and it ended up happening. So I really am impressed with Trevor Lawrence. I'm glad I have my money on the Jaguars winning the division. I'm glad I have my money on Trevor Lawrence MVP. And if they were to beat the Kansas City Chiefs this week, which I'm still undecided as far as where I'm going to be laying my money on this game. But I guess I had to ride my Jags, and my official bet will be the Jacksonville Jaguars right now. But don't get me wrong. I think that this game is going to be a coin flip, but in a good way, as opposed to the other games that we talked about in a bad way. Like, I cannot wait to watch these two quarterbacks duel out.
Yeah, I think this game is going to be fantastic as well. So I think that the Chiefs are going to win this game. I think that they're one of those teams that knows when they need to bounce back, how to bounce back. I think Mahomes and Reed are definitely going to make that happen. I personally am not convinced Travis Kelce is going to play. I've been hearing he had to get I don't know the terminology of it, but 35 or 45 cc's of blood taken out of his knee. So apparently they're kind of scared about what's going on inside of the knee, which makes sense. I mean, if it's bleeding, I'm not a doctor or anything. God only knows what's going on with that shit. But Chris Jones is going to play. I think he'll definitely be on a pitch count. But even if he plays 50% of snaps, I think that is a big impact. Brandon Sheriff, he got hurt last week. It's kind of 50-50 if he's going to play. But even if he does play, he's not going to be at 100%. And I was really, really impressed by the Chiefs' defense last week, honestly, without Chris Jones, with their offense struggling. They only gave up, they only gave up 14 points. That one touchdown was that pick six. So, and I think that the Lions are a solid offense in this league. So, to me, I think that, like you said, it's going to be a higher scoring game. I think that the Jags are going to be able to produce. It's not like the Chiefs are going to completely shut them out. But one of the big things last week that I really think that people kind of forgot about, and even me, where in our group chat with all of our buddies, I was really tearing Kadarius Toney up, and Sky Moore, obviously. But because Sky Moore hurt my soul last week, obviously, it was my start of the week. It didn't turn out.
I think he bounces back, man. I think he has a great game. I'm starting him.
So do I. So the leagues that I have him are deeper leagues. I don't have to start them, so I'm going to wait until I'm going to wait. Like last week, I benched him I started him over DK Metcalf. Still won the league, thank God, or I won the week, thank God. But, that's besides the point. But I think that one of the things that's overlooked is, one, the Chiefs didn't know that they were going to be without Travis Kelce until, Tuesday night? Wednesday? This was not part of the game plan. I think that them game planning without Travis Kelce is going to help these receivers a lot more. I think that the timing is going to be down. Mahomes and Andy Reid are going to make sure that these receivers know what they're doing at every moment. And the thing with Toney that I wanted to mention is, he got injured right at the beginning of training camp. So he comes in, everybody's saying, oh, he's healthy, he's fine, he looks good, he's fast, whatever. He gets hurt, no practice. He finally got healthy last week before the game, 4 or 5 days before the game. They were like, all right, he's good to go, he's going to play. So I think that Kadarius Toney is going to be better. I think that every part of this receiving core is going to be better. And I think that Mahomes is going to be one of those games where he just is fantastic, lights out. And I think that the Chiefs are going to pull this one out.
Hell yeah, man. I can't argue against anything there. And I don't want to. I just think that this is a game that all fans should really just sit back and enjoy.
That's why I was just...
Yeah, I mean, this was when we did our top 10 most excited games, this was in that list. So up next, we have a game that might not be as exciting, but I think will be great to display where these two young quarterbacks are now that they're going to be going against each other, and that is the Packers versus the Falcons. I will say the Packers looked a lot better than I thought. You were right about that team, and the Falcons were actually my suicide pool team last week. And, that game, I think a lot of people are not realizing how good the Falcons played. I mean, there were a good amount of turnovers, but Bryce Young didn't look bad. Like I thought that the lock of the week this week would be taking the Saints over the Panthers, but Bryce Young looked pretty good. He looked pretty composed. He impressed me a lot. That was actually a game that was on red zone pretty frequently, so I feel like I got like a good sense of what was going on that entire game. Um, it was a tale of two halves. Desmond Ritter looked like he couldn't pass the ball at all in the first half, and it was mostly Bijan, Tyler Algier, and just the run game. But then the second half, he started throwing the ball. I think that Kyle Pitts is going to get a lot more targets this week. He didn't really get many last week, and the ones that he did, I mean, one of the best plays of the week, probably like a top 5 catch of the week, was the one big bomb that he did end up catching. Bijan looked incredible. This is a game that I think is going to be pretty high scoring, surprisingly. Like, this is a game. Let me look at let's see, where's it at? Oh, yeah. No, give me that over. Like, it's such a low over under. It's 40.5. I actually think that this game could be a showcase for both Love and Ritter. The Packers defense looked phenomenal, but I think that Ritter's like a little bit more polished than Fields was last week. So I'm going to go with the Falcons, but this is a game where I'm just making that pick just because they're at home. Honestly, that's what it came down to, is just me picking them because they're at home, and I expect the passing game to be better.
Yeah, so these are two teams that coming into the year I'm pretty high on. I have them both winning the division. I think that the Falcons, one of the reasons that they won last week, and it was a big reason why they won, I felt like they had really opportunistic turnovers. They got turnovers at great times, in my opinion. Their run game was obviously fantastic. I think that their run game is still going to be pretty solid against the Packers, quite honestly. Um, but I am concerned about what I saw out of Ritter. He was efficient, 15 of 18, but he really didn't push it down the field other than that one throw to Kyle Pitts. I just think that overall the Packers, they're kind of similar teams in a sense, but I think that the Packers have a slightly better roster, and I think that they have right now at this exact moment they have this slightly better quarterback as well. Um, I actually feel pretty good about this game. I think it's going to be one of those games that the Packers are going to win by like a touchdown, but the entire game is going to be nitty gritty. It's going to come down to the wire, but I do think that the Packers are going to pull this one out.
Yeah, I think. Do you like the over with me as well, or no?
What was it,
I mean,
40.5?
40.5. That's just saying both need 2. But
I'm torn. That's probably a stay away for me, quite honestly. Because I could see it going either way. I think that both of these defenses have the potential to, cause havoc and do really well. But at the same time, if they get a turnover and give their team the ball with inside the 20, that's how points get on the board extremely well. If I had to pick one, I would lean under, but I wouldn't touch it.
And up next, we have the Raiders versus the Bills. I had the Raiders last week beating the Broncos. I was really happy about that. The Raiders are my dad's team, so I always support them as much as I can. I actually cashed out of the bet where I had them having the least wins because I felt like that was just wrong. But yeah, the Raiders get in a situation where they're getting 9.5 against the Bills. I kind of want to take that just because of how abysmal Josh Allen looked. I mean, it's either that next week Josh Allen comes out and makes all the right plays because Josh Allen looked like a backyard quarterback. Like, that's how bad he was. Like, seriously, there were so many spots when you just looked and there was a check down that was open, or he just needed to throw the ball out of bounds, or he needed to run. But instead, he just decided to huck the ball down the field in a double coverage, way over the receiver's head, right into the corner. Like, as good as the Jets defense is, their secondary got a free game, like literally the free game. None of those picks were like talented interceptions. It was literally Josh Allen overthrowing the receiver by 15 yards and it just going right into the hands of the corner. I mean, it was brutal. But at the end of the day, because I don't want to talk about this game that long, at the end of the day, I am going to pick the Bills. I do think that James Cook has a great game because they don't want Allen to touch the ball as much. So I think that James Cook gets a lot of rushing opportunities. He actually looked much better than I thought he was going to be. And I liked him for fantasy, but I meant like in real life. Like he looked pretty talented.
Yeah, obviously the Raiders, I didn't expect them to win last week. They looked, I wouldn't say they looked great. They played a Broncos team who's, middle of the pack at the same time, divisional opponent. Um, but they grinded it out and won it. I don't think that they're going to be able to do it this week. I think that the Bills are going to be pissed off of their performance, especially Josh Allen. I think that they're going to win by at least 2 touchdowns. I don't think this is going to be a particularly good game. I think the Bills are just going to absolutely dominate them, quite honestly.
All right. And the final game of the 1 o'clocks, we're probably split on this pick. The Chargers, what happened to their defense? We knew that was going to be a shootout. J.C. Jackson, by the way, I don't know if you saw that. That PI really cost them the game. I mean, they lost by 2. That gift wrapped the Dolphins a field goal right before the end of the half. That literally lost them the game. As you know, I'm obviously going to be more critical of Herbert than you are, even though I do like him this year and I do still have the Chargers as my division winner. But I do think that we need to get over thinking that he's the next big thing just because how many opportunities is he going to get in these shootout type games and then come out on the losing side? I mean, he was outdueled by Derek Carr 2 years ago in a similar situation. Last year, the offense completely shut down against Trevor Lawrence and the Jags. And Tua outdueled him last week. And this week, you're in a spot where everyone is expecting the Chargers to win. And this is kind of the game where it's kind of like last week where I picked the Raiders. The reason I picked the Raiders was because it was an underdog that not really anyone was looking at. And that's why I do really like the Titans. Most of the handle is going to be going on the Chargers. The Titans didn't look good at all. Defensively, they look solid. They were exactly what I expected from a Vrabel team, and that's the thing. That's why I'm going with the Titans. I think that they just win this game with pure grit versus a softer team in the Chargers that just kind of played in like a just a college style game last week with just back and forth scoring, no defense whatsoever. And now they're playing a really disciplined Titans team. I think as long as Tannehill doesn't turn the ball over the way that he did last week, they win this game pretty easily. Derrick Henry is going to have 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Chargers run defense just literally doesn't exist. I mean, there were even some plays last week where like Salman Ahmed was making decent plays. Derrick Henry, Vrabel came out after the last game and said that that'll be the last time that Henry doesn't get, 20 plus touches. He is going to dominate this game. And I think as long as the Titans go up early, they hold with their defense and I think it's just a very conservative game. And I have the Titans winning. I think it's a low scoring game, and in a low scoring game, I think it favors the Titans.
Yeah, so we are on opposite ends of this one. I think obviously the Chargers lost last week. Their defense looked horrible, but at the same time, their offense did look good. And it wasn't just Herbert; he really didn't have that big flashy passing game. But it's because their run game was fantastic. Now, is it because the Dolphins' run defense blows, or is it because the new running scheme for the Chargers is better than it's been in the past, or they're more willing to stick with it than they were in the past? I think it's honestly a little bit of both. I think that the Dolphins aren't going to be a great run defense, but I think that the Chargers' run offense is going to be one of those ones that you can rely on. My biggest concern with this game is how injured is Austin Eckler. They mentioned something about his ankles a little tweaked up, so we'll see how bad he's hurt. But I think that the Chargers are going to be able to score more than 16 points in this game, which is what they scored last week. And quite honestly, I'm not convinced that the Titans will be able to score more than they did last week against the Saints. I think that one thing about the defense being horrible last week is that the Dolphins, we can both agree, when Tua and those 2 receivers are healthy, they're a top 10 offense. Maybe probably even better than that. You know what I mean? Especially in the passing game. I think this is an exact opposite situation. The offense on the Titans is god awful. We saw it last week. The offensive line is horrible. I think that Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack are going to have a field day on all passing downs. Like you said, if Henry has a big day, that is the path to victory. But I think that they're going to be able to sell out on the run, not really worry about the receivers. I think that Hopkins is the only one that's going to be able to take advantage of them. So I think if they say, all right, shell coverage on Hopkins, sell out on the run, I think that the rest of their defense is going to be fine in those one-on-one situations, and I think that they're just going to be able to outpace them in scoring, and the Titans aren't going to be able to keep up.
And now we're in the 4:00 window. First game, pretty boring one. 49ers, Rams. I was on the Rams last week. I do think that their offense looked good. I wouldn't be shocked if they do pull away with this one. I'm definitely going to take the Rams plus the points. But at the end of the day, I am going to go with the Niners. I feel like I don't need to discuss this game that much. The Niners looked fantastic against the Steelers defense. That is much better than the Rams defense. Brock Purdy was pretty damn locked in. And Christian McCaffrey, just absolute incredible talent. Brandon Ayuk, really, since Purdy has become like a quintessential X receiver, and that was on display last week. He looked great. Didn't really want to talk about this game that much because I'm not really excited. I don't think I'll glance once at my TV for this one, but I am going to go with the Niners.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that, I think the Rams overperformed this past week. I think that Stafford was phenomenal. That's one thing that I do want to say is that Stafford, if you give him time, it doesn't matter who his receivers are, obviously. He's got Puka Nacua, Van Jefferson, and Tusu Atwell out there, and he's dotting people up. But yeah, the 49ers are just, they're one of those teams that is in that top echelon, and I don't think the Rams stand a chance in this game. I think the 49ers are going to run away with this thing.
And up next, another game that we're probably not going to flip on our TVs for. We were talking earlier saying how last week it was more the 4 o'clocks that everyone was excited for, and the 1 o'clock window was weak. This week, it's definitely the 1 o'clock window is a little bit weaker. I mean, is much stronger than the 4 o'clocks. There's really only, I don't think any of these games are going to be close. First one, Giants and Cardinals. The Giants looked abysmal last week, but a lot of that is just because they started off on like such a negative game script. I mean, there's nothing more heartbreaking than having a defensive touchdown to kick off a game. I feel like that just puts your mentality at a horrible spot. And let's be honest, the Cardinals defensive line, two. The Cardinals defensive line is not the Cowboys defensive line. I'll get to it when we talk about the Jets, but this Cowboys team's legit. And I think that when the Giants win this game by double digits, you're going to really like understand how legit this Cowboys defense is. I mean, as bad as Daniel Jones played, he didn't really have any time whatsoever. They were firing on all cylinders. When you have that Cowboys D line with Lawrence and Parsons both healthy, it's very difficult for any tackle, even good tackles. Like Andrew Thomas was a great tackle last year, and Micah Parsons made him look like he was lube. That's how easy Parsons was able to get through him. And then the corner play, adding Gilmore was huge for the Cowboys. So I think a lot of people are going to overreact. And the Giants, I mean, I would never call a minus 200 line a great line, but I do think that the Giants end up winning this one. I do think that they cover. I think that they bounce back because at the end of the day, they still are a well-coached team with a quarterback who's decent. I think that Darren Waller wasn't really – you're not going to rely on your tight end when you're down 25 points, whereas in this scenario, I think that he's going to be utilized a lot more in the game script. And Saquon's going to have a good day. I think this is a bounce-back win for the Giants.
No, I agree. I really don't have much to say. Everything that you said, I completely agree with. I think that the Giants are a much better team than the Cardinals. I think that there's a decent shot that we saw the Giants play their worst game of the year last week and the Cardinals play their best game of the year.
And up next, another game that I'm sure, I don't know about you, but I don't expect to be close. It is the Cowboys versus the Jets. I think that even though the Jets ended up getting that win in overtime, it was the moment. It was 9/11. It was a miracle. It was in New York. That entire team's playing for their quarterback that just went down. And Josh Allen, like I said, Josh Allen should be in special needs classes today. He was honestly that bad, and I've never been a big Josh Allen fan, but to go from looking like one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the league 2 years ago, and I'm not going to deny that he was a top 3 quarterback in the league 2 years ago, to looking like fresh out of college Jameis Winston is pretty crazy. So I do not expect Dak to make those type of mistakes. Dak is much safer. And the thing that's really crazy about that game is they didn't need to throw. Like the Cowboys didn't need to pass. Like Brandon Cooks wheels. I expect Brandon Cooks to have a really good game this week, especially because Sauce is going to be on CeeDee Lamb. But Brandon Cook is going to have fresh wheels, and he's going to burn whoever's covering him on the Jets. I think that this is a better game for Pollard. I think that just the defense in general is probably another 3 interception game for the Cowboys defense, another dominant fantasy game. I have the Cowboys winning this probably by 10 to 20 points.
Yeah, so I think that the Cowboys are going to win this game as well. I think that the max is 10, though. I think that the Jets defense is actually going to be able to corral the Cowboys offense pretty well. Not like completely shut it out or anything, but I think that, they're going to have a good enough game to where the Cowboys aren't marching up and down the field. And one of the things that first drive last week in that Giants-Cowboys game, the Giants ran the ball really, really well, and then blocked fumble or blocked kick, interception, pick six. They're down 2 scores, and now they're kind of pressing it. They got out of their mode. And you saw it yesterday. Even though that the Jets were down by at least a touchdown for the majority of that game, they kept running the ball. They stuck to it, and it really worked out for them. And what you saw is the Cowboys' defense is fantastic. But what they want you to do is they want you to be in situations where they know you're passing the ball and they can go tear you up. So I think that the Jets are going to stay more on the line of we need to run, let's run, let's run, let's run. So I think it's going to be a close game, but I do think the Cowboys are going to win. I'd say like from anywhere from 3 to 7, quite honestly.
Next up, we have the Broncos versus Commanders. And I'll say this, the Commanders, we were both pretty high on them, but they almost lost that game. Sam Howell didn't look that good. He was sacked a lot. Their offensive line didn't look great against a pretty poor Cardinals D-line. I'm just going to go out there and say it. I think that the Broncos dominate this game. I think that Russell Wilson's going to be out to prove something after a lackluster week 1 performance against the Raiders. Sean Payton's not going to drop 2 in a row. I think the Broncos are as much of a lock this week as any game, and them being like minus 150, minus 165 on some books. I think that that's a great bet to make. The Commanders just really, they did everything that they could to lose that game against the Cardinals. It's just the Cardinals have the talent of a college football team. Honestly, the Cardinals look pretty well coached. They didn't perform that horribly. I think that just looked worse on the Commanders, that they didn't end up, dominating that game the way that everyone was expecting them to. So I am going to go with the Broncos. I think Russell Wilson makes it rain in Washington.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a close game again, but I do agree with you. I think the Broncos are going to pull away with it. They just have the better coach. This is one of the things that Ron Rivera, back when he was with the Panthers, he was a well-respected coach. I think that he's quite honestly one of the in the worst third coaches in the league. I don't think he's a good coach. He's just he was like that quote that came out a couple weeks ago where he was like, "Oh wow, Sam Howell's good. I wish I'd have known that last year." Didn't you watch him in practice every week? Didn't you? I don't know. I think he's one of the worst. And I think that the Broncos defense looked really good as we expected. I think that it's going to be one of those games that's lower scoring and that the Broncos win out. Just Russell Wilson dink and dunk his way he did last week, but I think that they find a way to score a little bit more than last week. And I think they're going to win by a touchdown, something like that.
Yeah, I like them a lot this week. And now on to Sunday night football. Kind of a doozy, but it'll be interesting. Dolphins, Patriots. This is a very interesting situation because the Dolphins, I think that their defense is going to play much better than they played last week. at the end of the day, I think that was just a horrible second half by the Eagles and less of like a great second half by the Patriots. The Eagles made some very questionable decisions. There's no reason why the Eagles should have been in a position to even almost lose that game. They should have punted on fourth down at the very end. Didn't understand that at all. So I think that Vegas is definitely overreacting to how well that the Patriots played the Eagles. Like you said, the Eagles didn't play many of their starters at all during the preseason. So I think this Patriots team was just at home and had some momentum. I think that the Dolphins end up winning this one by a lot. I can't believe the line's minus 155, especially because you always think Bill Belichick, what he does great, and he did it last week to A.J. Brown, he always shuts down the wide receiver one on most teams, but Tyreek Hill is unguardable. I mean, even against Belichick, Tyreek Hill has 36 catches for 550 yards and has scored 6 touchdowns in 6 games against the Patriots in his career. So he has dominated the Patriots. He's that one weapon that Belichick can't quite scheme away to hide. And so I do think that the Dolphins just roll through that momentum. I think that when you get a big win like that, when you get the ball at the end and then you end up driving down the field and winning, I think that it's really hard for you to stifle that momentum. I think they come out, score first, score often, and win.
Yeah, so this is a game I'm actually kind of excited for because I do think that the Patriots defense is really good. So it's one of the better defenses in the league versus one of the better offenses in the league. I do see the same side pulling it out, though. At the end of the day, I think that the Dolphins will be able to score enough to win this game. I was surprised, honestly, at how the Patriots offense pulled it together in the second half last week. Um, they were just thinking and dunking their way down the field. And I think that a lot like teams are going to see that. And quite honestly, a team like like some teams might just let it happen because you're wasting so much time on the clock when you're doing that. It's hard to mount a comeback. I think that the Dolphins are going to end up winning this game by 10, but I think it's going to be really, really close. I think they'll be up by by one possession the entire game. And then in that fourth quarter, they'll score one more time to put the icing on the cake, and the Patriots just won't be able to mount a comeback.
I'm glad that we're together on that pick. I didn't know if it was just me that thought that the Dolphins were going to end up winning by a good bit. Now, it does seem weird to have 2 games on Mondays. I don't know if I really like it because I do like locking into the one game. If they were different time periods, like let's say there was a 6:30 game and then like a 10 o'clock game, I'd prefer that to what it is. Instead, it's going to be overlap. The Saints and Panthers starts at 7, and then the Browns Steelers starts at 8. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to flip the channel the second the Browns Steelers game starts. But in a game where I thought, like I said earlier in the video, going into the season, I had the Saints just really just pulling things out and dominating this game. I think that's going to be a lot closer. I agree with Vegas here with the line at +3. Then again, the Saints just couldn't get their offense rolling. I don't know what it was last week, but the Titans are a good defense. I am still going to pick the New Orleans Saints. It's just they went from a team that I think would have been like a suicide pool and like bet of the week team to a team where I didn't love what I saw week 1. They had some flashes. Olave looked like he was shaken up at one point. Thankfully, he's okay and bounced back. Jamal Williams had some good plays. He had a couple good runs that were ran back due to penalties. Penalties really is what killed this offense last week. And I expect a better game from Derek Carr, and I think that they do get the win, but not as convinced that they're going to win 100% versus how I was last week. Because, like I said, I think Bryce Young actually played pretty well.
Yeah, I just think that the Saints defense is going to be too much for them, quite honestly. The Saints defense, while I think that they played an inferior offensive line, so I don't know if the pass rush is going to be as good as it was last week with against the Titans and Ryan Tannehill. I think that they will be able to get pressure against Bryce Young, and I think that they're going to have a hard time scoring. I see this game like 24-14. I think that the Saints – it's they're not going to be blowing them out the entire game, but I think they'll end up winning final score pretty comfortably. I think Olave is going to have a big day. He looked great last week, and J.C. Horn's out, which makes it that much harder to cover this offense. So I think that the Saints are going to win this game pretty comfortably.
And then up next, we have Browns Steelers, and this is a game that neither you nor I have texted each other about once. So I'm wondering how we're going to think going into this game. The Browns just got a great win, a great upset against the Bengals. They're going to have a lot of momentum. Where on the flip side, the Steelers just don't have the momentum. They got killed by a great 49ers team. Deontay Johnson, the guy who stretches the field, he ended up getting injured. He's out. He's probably going to miss a couple weeks. I do think, though, that Najee Harris has a better game. I think that they definitely scheme some extra touches for him, not just in the run game, but in the pass game as well. I think that they do need to get him involved. This is a very close line, and my official prediction is the Steelers, but it's such a close line to where I feel like I wouldn't be shocked if the Browns just blow them out. I'm really interested to hear what you have to say on it because I know you're high on both of these teams. I think Watson just didn't impress me as much as I expected. Like the Browns did great, their defense did great, but I don't know if Watson looked that great. And the Steelers' defense is much more formidable in my opinion than the Bengals. So I just think this is a low-scoring game. Whoever gets the final field goal wins.
Yeah, so I think it's also going to be a really low scoring game. I think so. This is my game of the week. I'm really, really excited to watch this game. I think it's going to be a defensive battle. Like you said, I think the final score is going to be like 20-17 or something like that. Field goal wins the game. But I am going to go with the Browns in this game. I think that while the Steelers have a great defense, I think that the Browns have a really, really good defense as well. And I think that they have a slightly better offense at this point. Like you said, Watson wasn't spectacular, but he made the plays he needed to make, especially extending plays with his legs. I kind of see the same thing happening next week, or on Monday, I should say. But I'm really, really excited this game. I think that the Browns are going to end up winning by a field goal, as I said. But like you said, this game is a coin flip to me. I'm kind of scared because technically right now, Pittsburgh is a home dog. Tomlin as a home dog is always fantastic. That's why we both one of the reasons we both liked the Steelers last week. But I'm going to go with the Browns here. I think that they're going to be able to squeak this one out.
All right, and that wraps up all of our segments so far as picking. Now we're getting into the fantasy aspect. So we're going to rattle off our starts of the week. We'll try and be quick and efficient with it. Who do you got at quarterback this week?
Quarterback, I'm going to go with Anthony Richardson. He's playing against the Texans. He looked really, really good last week. He was running the ball a lot, and I think it's going to be a lot more of the same, except with a slightly worse defense than he played last week. I think that the Colts are actually going to be able to score a decent amount this week. And I think that Anthony Richardson is going to have a good day for fantasy for sure.
I like it a lot. I think that it happens. Mine is going to be Trevor Lawrence. We expect this game to be a shootout. You're getting great value on Lawrence on DFS lineups. I'm sure we'll talk about that in the DFS show. But yeah, if we're expecting this game to be the highest scoring game of the week, we expect Trevor Lawrence to have a lot of passing yards, a lot of passing touchdowns. I definitely think he has 2-3 passing touchdowns and a lot of yards. I don't think he has another pick as well this week. So I'm really on Trevor Lawrence. Moving on to running back. And we'll keep it staggered. So I'll go twice and then you go twice. So running back this week, I have Jahmyr Gibbs. He just looked fantastic. I hope you guys checked out our video. It's already at like 500 views right now about why you should trade for Jahmyr Gibbs. That video is kicking ass. Jahmyr Gibbs is a fantastic talent. And the Seahawks run defense was horrid last week, gave up 3 touchdowns on the ground. I just love the opportunity for him this week to have a big week.
Yeah, I like that pick. I'm going to go with Rachaad White, and this is more of just to give people confidence. I think that last week he really didn't look good, and it was more of the offense just being completely like the offensive line not playing all that well. I think that the Bears' defensive line is even worse than the Vikings is, and I think that like we said earlier, I see a world where Baker might not be as efficient as he was last week, even though it was all short stuff. I think that White could actually rip off a couple of big plays as well. We saw, obviously, Aaron Jones did really well, a couple of big plays last week. I kind of see that. I see a lot in the passing game for him. So I just really like the opportunity. And this is more just to say, hey, listen, he's not going to be awful all season. He did have a bad game, but he can still be your guy. And then at receiver, I'm going to go with Michael Pittman. I already mentioned it a little bit with Anthony Richardson. I think that the Colts are really going to be able to score. And this is another one where, people last week really didn't know. I feel like Pittman was a big question mark coming into this season. And, last week he ended up having that longer touchdown, which obviously helped buoy his statistics. I think that he's going to be a guy who week in, week out is getting a ton of targets, and he's got a soft matchup this week. I think he's going to have a really good game.
And my start of the week at wide receiver is DeAndre Hopkins. He got a decent amount of targets last week, just really great coverage by Marshawn Lattimore. I mean, Lattimore turned the ball over a lot. His one interception was absolutely beautiful where he just out-jumped DeAndre Hopkins, which is crazy because that doesn't happen. So I think Hopkins really bounces back this week. The Chargers defense looked horrible against wide receivers, and he's really the only guy there. So even if they double him, he should get a lot of looks, and I expect a Hopkins touchdown, maybe an 80-yard game, but he is my start of the week. And actually, I hit last week on my receiver. It was Calvin Ridley. He went off. My tight end start of the week is TJ Hawkinson. Absolutely love this matchup against the Eagles. I mentioned earlier that he's my touchdown scorer, so I don't need to go into much detail about him. But yeah, a game where he should get a lot of targets, a lot of underneath stuff. Like you said, it worked for the Patriots. If the Vikings are smart, they end up giving him like 6 or 7 receptions this week.
Yeah, and my guy is going to be Dalton Kincaid. Sorry, the picture there jacked me up a little bit. That was from one of our other videos that you should check out, our first touchdown scorer. But yeah, so I'm going to go with Dalton Kincaid. I really like Dalton Kincaid this week. I think that, like you've been saying all pod long, the defense just looked, or Josh Allen just looked awful, quite honestly. But in the opportunities that he got, he had 4 catches. He only had 4 targets. He, had 26 yards, so not great. But one, like I said, Allen was horrible, and 2, the Jets have an amazing defense. And I said it earlier in our game breakdown, I think that the Bills are really going to put it on against the Raiders. I think it's going to be one of those things, kind of help the team's momentum come back, their swagger come back. And I think they're going to score a ton of points, and I think that Dalton Kincaid is going to be a big part of that.
All right, in the final segment of the show, we haven't really discussed them, so I'll just put mine up. Their suicide pick of the week. We both hit. We're both alive. My pick for the week is going to be the Dallas Cowboys against the New York Jets. We already talked about the game, so I'm just going to say that's my suicide pick.
Yeah, I can't really blame you on that one. A little scary just because how good the Jets defense is, but their offense against the Cowboys defense is going to be scary. And I'm going to go with the Bills. Like I said, I think that the Bills, there's a chance that they might score 40 points this week. I think that they're going to score a lot and that they're just going to keep pouring it on and pouring it on. I think that the Raiders are going to, they only scored 17 points last week. And I think that the Bills defense is at the very minimum same level without Von Miller, at least same level, maybe even better than the Broncos defense. So, I think that they're going to have a hard time scoring, and I think that the Bills are going to put a whooping on them.
All right, and there you have it. Our official Week 2 podcast is in the books. Make sure to like this video, subscribe for more. We will see you here next weekend. Also, turn on those notifications for the channel because we're going to have our best bets video coming out, first touchdown scorers, DFS lineups, and possibly some random other videos like how we released the Gibbs one this week. So we will catch y'all later. Peace.